Hi, welcome back to Art with Miss Teresa. So today we're going to need paper, something round. You can either get a cup or a bowl, some crayons, some markers or watercolors, a pencil, and I like having black marker around. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be drawing food. And I'm going to start with some apples because that's the beginning of the alphabet. So we're going to start with the letter A. And I'm going to show you how to make a whole apple and an apple that's already been eaten. So this is what our end picture might look like. So we're going to get started. Okay, so I'm going to take my thing that's circular, and I'm going to take a pencil and draw around it. Now make sure that you're drawing with a pencil and not with a marker around whatever it is you're tracing, because some markers don't come off of cups and bowls. Okay. So apples come in all sorts of flavors, and we actually grow a lot of apples right here in Washington. I'm going to start at the top and kind of make a dot and another one on its opposite side. We're going to make it kind of look like an umbrella. And here's a little rainbow, another rainbow, another one, and another one. And then I'm going to make it kind of come out and connect. And then I'm going to make the stem, because apples are connected to trees, so they need to connect somewhere. And I'm going to kind of color this in a little bit darker. Okay, so on the bottom we're going to do the same thing, but the bottoms of apples tend to be smaller than the tops of apples. So we're going to do the same kind of thing, but not make it as big. So upside down rainbow, upside down rainbow, upside down rainbow. And you can actually turn your page if you want to just do it this way, which is kind of fun because you could turn it around. All right, now we're going to make the core. And it's kind of like a really long rainbow. And then on the other side, it's kind of symmetrical. Remember that word from before? Okay, so now we have an apple core. In the middle, that's where the seeds of an apple are. And so it kind of looks like a teardrop. And I'm going to make this a little bit darker, just like the stem. Alrighty. So that's our first one, and we're going to go back and color that in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to make another circle because we're going to make a whole apple. My favorite way to eat apples is probably in an apple pie. And apple pies have a lot of tart apples, which means that they're kind of sour. They're not overly sweet, because you add other sugary things to the pie, and that makes it extra delicious. That's actually a type of apple. So there's red delicious apples. Sometimes I like to go to the grocery store and buy one of each, and then we kind of do a taste test at home. So maybe next time you're at the grocery store, you can request an apple or two. Okay, so we're going to, this time we're not going to make the little rainbows across. We're going to start at the top and make a dot at the bottom. And we're kind of going to go a little bit outside the circle. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so at the bottom here, and I can actually draw it on this paper too, is it kind of looks like little tiny hairs. Next time you look at an apple, look at what the stem looks like on the top and then flip it over and see what kind of textures it has on the bottom. Okay. And one of my favorite apples is a Fuji apple. And that originally came from Japan, but we grow it here. And our our apples are pretty tasty. I liked apples that are super crunchy, or sometimes you will put peanut butter or caramel on them. That's always a nice treat to have. You could always add things like apple with peanut butter and raisins. That tastes really good together. Okay, so here is my full apple. And apples have like little tiny dots on them, on their skin, which is the outside of the apple. It's always good to wash your apples before you eat them, just because. Okay, so I'm going to make some dots, kind of for texture. It makes it a little more interesting. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here, because it's not just one flat color. Sometimes apples will be multiple colors, like it'll be red and yellow and a combination of that in between. And that's kind of neat to look at too. Okay. And I think I want to show you one more way to draw an apple. Okay. So we're going to do the circle again. Remember, with your pencil and not your pen. And make sure before you start using anything to trace that you ask your big person if it's okay to use that. Okay. So we're going to make a dot, make a dot. We're going to make the stem, because remember, it's the part that's connected. And some apples even have leaves attached to them. So if you want to, you can add a leaf. And one of the ways that you can do that is you kind of make that same eye shape from before. And then straight down the middle, there's kind of a crease. And since it's a plant, it has texture, so we're going to go across. And it is completely okay if your picture doesn't look like mine. I've never seen two exact apples that were the same. So it makes them unique. They're all very good to eat. Okay. Alrighty. So this one, I'm going to have it so it looks like the apple is cut. So we're going to make that bend, and then it looks like the whole apple again. And I'm going to take a line straight down. And if you want to do this with pencil first and then trace it with marker, that's completely up to you. I just like to draw on marker. And then kind of a big rainbow. And then on the inside, we're going to have some seeds. So this way it looks like somebody took a knife and then cut a piece off. And some people like to cut their apples into slices, or some people just like to eat it just whole. I've seen people eat the center of it. I don't really like to eat seeds, so I will leave the core and I'll put it in my compost pile, which means that it gets mixed in with the soil and makes the soil richer, or I give it to my rabbits. Okay, so Little dots for texture. And now we have 3 apples. There's kind of a inner rainbow, but it's very faint, which means it's kind of little. On the inside. And next time you get a chance to have an apple in front of you that's open, look at the textures and then try to draw what it would look like. Okay, so we're going to start coloring. I'm going to use 3 different colors because apples come in all sorts of colors. So for my first one, the inside is kind of this peachy color. So I'm going to use that. And this would be a good time if you want to like erase the original circle. But you can keep it there if you want to. Okay. And then, so I think I'm going to make this into a red delicious. Do you guys have any apple stories? When I was traveling to Eastern Washington, we stopped by a place called the Apple and Cotlet Factory. And what they do is they take local apples and they get the flavor from them and then they mix it with other ingredients and they make a candy that was originally called a Turkish Delight. And sometimes you'll see them in boxes about this long and about this thin, and they look like little rectangles and they're really super tasty. If you get a chance to try one, I highly recommend it. In the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they eat Turkish Delight. So I'm going to keep on coloring. And when I went to Leavenworth, which is a German village, they had a candy store that had candied apples, which means that they take caramel and coat the apple with a stick. And they either have that or they have this red glaze over it. And so you can actually see the apple through it, which I also think is kind of neat. It has a lot of sugar in it, so it's also nice to be able to share that kind of treat with somebody. Some of my favorite apples are the Fuji. I like anything crisp. I know that there's an apple that kind of tastes like cotton candy. We're going to have to get some more information on that, and maybe I should try it. Maybe do a taste test. You can make it into apple sauce or apple juice or sparkling apple cider. So there's a lot of things that you can make apples into. You can do apple jam, apple butter, which is really dark brown, but it tastes really good on toast. Okay, so stems tend to be brown because they're parts of trees. Okay, and the pits are kind of dark brown, black in color. So there's my first apple. And sometimes apples have that different two-tone thing going, so I'm going to make a little bit of yellow just on one side. And if you mix red and yellow together, you get the color orange. Okay, so there's my first one. And here's my second one. I'm going to make this one into a yellow delicious apple, or golden delicious anyway. And you can use watercolor, you can use crayon, you can use marker. You can use those Copic markers I talked about in the other video. You can do a combination, which means that if you want to, you can use more than one different way of coloring. And one of these days we're going to be doing watercolors because I think that that looks really cool. So apples thrive in our weather here, which means that it's pretty easy to grow here, and a group of trees together is called an orchard. So I'm going to use my green to color in my leaf. Okay, so I'm going to go 2 tones here, which means I'm going to take a little bit of this brown and kind of do the edges, and it gives it a little more texture and it makes it a little more interesting. So my stem is brown because remember that's the part that's connected to a tree. And there's some places you can actually go apple picking where they give you a basket and you can collect apples. I think that's kind of neat. Okay, so my third one, we're going to start with the inside of the apple. And I need that peachy color again. And Granny Smith apples, they're not all peachy on the inside. Sometimes they might be like light green, more yellow, almost white, really dark. There's a lot of different kinds of apples, and a lot of them are regional, which means that we might have to import, which means we bring in from other countries and places apples that we might not be able to grow here. Okay, so for this apple, I think I'm going to go kind of a light green. And there's some apples that are very, very sweet, and there's other ones that are very, very sour. And they come in all sizes. Like there's ones that could be this big, and there's ones that could be that big. But the ones that are bigger tend to cost more money.
Would that be like a Granny Smith?
Granny Smiths are pretty common, so they're kind of this size.
Mm-hmm. I meant the color that you're coloring that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm going to make the inside a little bit on the green side as well. But first I wanted to color the outside.
You're making us hungry back here, Miss Teresa.
I really like making applesauce for my kids. And sometimes I'll put cinnamon in it or with some brown sugar. Or sometimes I make it unsweet, which means that we don't add any extra sugar. It might just be the natural sugars that are inside fruit. Yeah. But Washington State has a lot of really cool produce that we harvest here and we grow here, and it gets shipped all over the place. And I remember treetop apple juice when I was a kid living in Germany, but treetop is located here. So the products that were made here were available all the way across the ocean to where I was living. So I think that that's kind of cool that it's all really connected. So I'm going to make the inside just a little bit on the green side. And it's okay to overlap your colors. Okay. So I'm going to make the edges just a little darker. And so sometimes you'll see me do this when I have crayons. It's because there's tiny little flecks of color, and so I'm trying to scrape them away. But when you do that, you might also be coloring across your paper. So just keep that in mind when you do that. And I'm gonna color my pits. And it's good to save seeds because you can replant them, and growing a plant is always really kind of fun to do. I like watching it go from seed to tiny plant to bigger plant, and then it grows into a bush or a tree, and then you can start the cycle all over, and then you can have apples. Alrighty. So here are my apples.
Wow. Let me zoom out a little so we can see those.
And remember all the basic shape. Here's the circle. And one of the best things to do is if you want to have whatever you're drawing in front of you, and then you can look at it and draw, look at it and draw. And there's no rule saying you can't like take all the time that you need to look at something, so that you kind of have it inside your head so that it can go from your head to your hand to your art supply. And if your apple doesn't look exactly like what you're looking at, that's fine too. It takes a lot of years of practice, and I would love to see your art. So if you wouldn't mind sending it to us, I'd really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Hey kids, we want to see your work. Just send your pictures and your stories to TV Classroom, 601 South 8th Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405.
Rules. 1. You have 10 seconds to pick your crewmate. 2. A new timer will appear with an exercise for the crewmate you picked. 3. You will get points for each correct crewmate and exercise you choose. 4. If you pick the imposter, you will lose all your points. 5. Use your math skills to see how many points you can get. Good luck.